begin.
Great, thank you. Hello and welcome. I call to order this December 16th, 2020 meeting of the Needham Finance Committee. It is the last meeting of the Finance Committee in the year 2020, and that is a good thing. As a preliminary matter, permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Josh Levy, you're muted.
Can you hear me? I'm here.
Yeah.
Barry Kaufman,
Here.
Tom Jacob,
Here.
Rick Lunetta,
Here.
Dick Riley,
Here.
and Louise Miller is not here yet, and John Conley is not here yet. And Louise Misgard, our staff member. Here. Great. Good evening. This open meeting of the Needham Finance Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as a reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. Except for the agenda item entitled Citizen Request to Address the Finance Committee, this meeting will not feature public comment. For this meeting, the Needham Finance Committee is convening by Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body will be available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do, permit me to cover some ground rules. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting them by name to provide any comment, questions, or motion. Please hold until your name is called. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before publicly speaking. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. As a first order of business, I would ask for a motion that this meeting will be continued to the committee's next meeting of January 6, 2021, if a technical problem develops.
So
Is
moved.
there such a motion?
Yes, I move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great,
Aye.
thank you. So turning to the first item on the agenda, citizen requests to address the Finance Committee. Are there any citizens wishing to address the Finance Committee, Dave?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Approval of the meeting minutes of December 9th, 2020. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes of last week's meeting?
I have, and I move their acceptance.
Second.
Great, let's take a roll call vote. Dick Riley,
Aye.
Barry Kaufman,
Yes.
Tom Jacob,
Yes.
Rick Lunetta,
Yes.
Josh Levy,
Yes.
John Conley,
Yes.
Louise Miller, yes, and myself, yes. Thank you. All right, moving to the department budget requests. The first is Town Clerk, Board of Registrars.
Madam Chair, I'll bring in Teddy Eaton, the town clerk.
Great, thank you.
Tab 4 in your books.
Hey, Teddy, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome. Thanks for
Thank you.
coming.
Teddy.
Madam
Good
Chair, I met with Teddy the other day and go through her budget. I will say hopefully everyone had a chance to review it. Obviously, it was a extraordinary year in the town clerk's office, as I think we all witnessed, and Teddy can better describe what it was like. But what's significant about this budget is actually, I think, maybe the only budget that's going down this year. And that's principally due to having fewer elections, thank God. And
Yes.
for a lot of reasons, and which Teddy can better describe. But essentially, other than just the numbers of elections, everything else is pretty much level funded. And I'll let Teddy walk through some of the specifics.
Well, I'd be glad to answer any questions. We had the September primary and the November election, which you don't want me to go into any detail because it was really a struggle, but we managed and we made it. So, and it's over. We had 2 spring elections, the April town election postponed to May 26th, and the presidential primary back in March 3rd. So it's been a busy year, and hopefully this next fiscal year is going to be a little quieter with only 1 election, but it will also give us a chance to catch up with things that kind of had to be put on the back burner during these 4 elections, this split between the 2 fiscal years. I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have any. I don't think you want me to run through the details of all the things that went on during this election. You don't have that much time.
Other than to say it went amazingly well from the outside. I know it was a little frantic on the inside, but I thought it went extremely well for all of us that participate in some way, shape, or form, whether it was absentee or early voting.
We tried to make sure every vote counted. We had probably over 200 voters from outside the country, and those are all hand counts, and those are emails, and you'd send the ballot out and they'd say, "Hi Teddy, how are you doing?" from Germany or Africa or wherever they were. And that works very well. The new legislation that they passed the end of June to be effective for the state primary and the state election really had everybody running as fast as they could, including the Secretary of State's office. But I think everybody came through, and I think it worked well.
Teddy, from my perspective, I just wanted to say thank you. My youngest daughter was a first-time voter, and she was absentee voting at school in California, and she was very concerned she wasn't going to get her absentee ballot. I cannot tell you probably how many times she told me she called the office to make sure it was on the way. So thank you for your patience.
Multiply that times how many, Teddy? How many?
We had, what was it? 20,263 people voted for this state election out of 23,892.
Wow.
So it was about 85%. And we've had that amount before, which surprised me a little bit, but we had 62% had voted either by early vote by mail or in person. So election day actually was a little bit anticlimactic because we had maybe 400 people at each precinct. So it wasn't so busy. And we have purchased the additional poll pads, which we had at the election, if anybody either early voted or went to the polls on election day. You checked in through this, it looked like a laptop. It's called a poll pad. For the first time doing it, I'm too conservative. I had to have a paper voting list to make sure it worked. And it did. So I'm not sure when we'll try it without a paper voting list, but so far so good.
Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what the other people said. Was from the outside, it looked very seamless. So, and that was excellent. I do have one question. Do you anticipate that in future elections that we're going to be a lot more mail-in voting? Is that going to be a standard, do you think, moving forward? Or?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
I absolutely think so. The only problem, and they've got to refine it a little bit, and that'll happen. The state sent out early vote applications to all registered voters in the Commonwealth as of July 1st. And what happened was people immediately returned their applications, which has to be recorded multiple times in the state system. And then when it came to early voting, which we thought would be quieter because people didn't want to show up in person to vote, they wanted to show up in person and early vote, and they'd bring their ballots that they had already been sent in the mail. So we kind of said, well, okay, we'll take your ballot, and yes, you can vote.
Yeah, I did notice on the Needham Facebook page, there's a lot of conversation about, okay, I've changed my mind. I want to do it early.
Yes.
I want to vote in person. What do I do?
But it worked. It worked. The amazing part of it was that the early voting we held in the select board chambers, which is a smaller area than each of the polling locations. So if people had gone to the polls on election day, they would have been more socially distanced than they were by coming early voting in the select board's office. But hopefully this is all going to be settled with the vaccine and as we go forward.
Hopefully. Louise?
Oh, I have a couple of questions. So did you keep to your budget, or are the additional expenses for early voting in some other expense line?
I think we're pretty much in budget. I also had applied for a grant and we received a little over $10,000 to pay for additional expenses. So I think we're going to be all set in that area. We did, of course, have extra people helping to prepare the ballots for mail. We had the early voting people that had to work, the election workers. I think we're pretty much on target so far.
Okay.
If not, I'll call Dave. If not, I'll call Dave.
All right. Let him know now while he can still apply for CARES Act funding. So my other question, though, is if there is legislature that I understand is pending right now to allow for early voting in general, even for local elections.
Don't get me started, Louise.
I'm not going to get you started. I'm just asking about dollars. So what would that mean for dollar-wise? Yes, dollar-wise next year.
Well, I haven't actually figured that out.
Okay.
I know the Mass Town Clerks are not in favor of early voting for local elections.
Yep, I know that.
Historically do not. I'm sure you do.
I do know that. Yep.
Historically, the town elections don't bring out a huge turnout. Yep. Not even close to what you get for the state election. And if we had, say, 10 days of early voting, 9 to 5 with 6 people working at $15 an hour, haven't done the math yet.
Okay, but it's not that significant.
No.
Okay. All right.
We'll see.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Barry?
Well, I just wanted to bring up an interesting anecdote, and I'll let Teddy elaborate, but I thought one of the more interesting things that happened this year is she set a record number of weddings that she performed
Oh.
as a result of weddings getting canceled.
Yes, yes.
By a lot.
Well, we usually do maybe 30 marriage intentions a year at the most. But this year we've done about 171 so far.
Wow.
Because Newton didn't want to do marriage intentions and Boston didn't want to and Waltham didn't want to. And they kept saying, oh, we'll go to Needham. we finally called these places and said, will you stop sending everyone to us? We can't handle all of them, you know, but with those came people that wanted to get married. A lot of them had their large wedding plans all scheduled and they had to be canceled, and they just wanted to get married now, and then they would have their celebration, you know, in the future when everything was a little safer for everybody. So yeah, it's been a busy marriage year.
So why would other towns not want to do that?
Maybe they didn't want to bring people into the town because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Or they were
I
overwhelmed
know.
with other things? Yeah.
Say again?
I said they were overwhelmed with other things.
And we weren't?
No, actually, I think that that speaks really highly of you, because I know that we had a hard time in Wayland with marriage intentions and other things. It was really hard to keep up. So the fact that you not only kept up, but handled others is pretty amazing.
Thank
Really
you, Louise. We tried.
Yeah.
It is a relief now that it's over.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have any questions for Teddy? Teddy, thank you very much. We
You're very
appreciate
welcome.
Thank
what
you,
you
Teddy.
do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Watch out for those minutes, Richard.
Don't worry about it. We have elections to worry about. We can worry about minutes later.
That was a dig. Thank you. Shall I just, will you have me leave, or should I just hit leave?
Dave, you're muted.
Dave, you're muted.
I will move you back to the audience, Teddy.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, I'm bringing in the director of the library and 3 members of the library trustees.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair, all are here.
Great. Hello, Ann, welcome. I think you're muted.
Okay. Hello. Thank
Hi,
you.
how are you?
Good, good. And you?
Good, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. Louise, do you want to
Yep.
start and give us an overview?
Yep. So the library budget for fiscal year 22 is essentially a cross between a level service and a level fund budget. The level service is for the salaried employees, and then those contractual items that we know are going to require an increase, such as the Minuteman Library Network fee. Everything else, the library is pretty much keeping level service. It's been a challenging year for the library, and I think it's a year that will probably result either in some permanent changes to the library, or maybe some thinking about how services are provided. The library has typically been an in-person service, and this year they have really had to think about how to provide the services that they normally provide, from children's programming and, you know, children's books, all the way up to adult programming, adult books, as well as services such as, you know, iPad rental and things of that nature. So to the library's credit and Ann's credit, they are managing to stay within budget as they provide those services. As Ann and I talked about the library, they're at the point where their 5-year strategic plan is due to be reviewed. And at this point, Anne is thinking it's more going to be a 2 to 3 year strategic plan. And then after that, maybe 5-year strategic plans. A lot of what the services are that are being provided this year are their pickup services. They're a little bit like retail industry, where customers are not able to go into the building. However, they are still providing what it is that the customers are asking for. And they have seen a great increase in both the attendance at programming, which is now available electronically. I think you're using Zoom for that. Yes, they're using Zoom for that. So they've seen a huge increase in attendance in their programming, as well as a large increase in their electronic resources. So they're looking at a couple of initiatives. They're looking at their website and trying to improve the website and provide more user services that are more clearly available through the website. And they're also looking at increasing some of the remote services, electronic books, and things of that nature. So when you look at the budget request is in line with what we would normally expect. They have provided a program called Overdrive and a supplementary program to Overdrive. Those are electronic books and additional copies of electronic books. Those have been funded through the state aid. And I think that their library should consider whether that should be part of their operating budget. If anything, going forward, they're going to be providing more rather than fewer electronic services. Anne and I talked a little bit about the additional circulation position and whether that was a need because of lack of staff, or whether that was a need because they saw transformation perhaps in the types of services that were being provided. And I think that I myself see that as less of a priority than bringing the Overdrive. If we were to bring something to the operating budget, for me, it would be the Overdrive services. And then let's see what some other services might be that could be needed at the library. We have used the state aid program to determine or to test, maybe pilot certain programs at the library and see whether or not they will work. We do expect a turn back this year from the Sunday hours because they are not operating on Sunday, and I think that's about $50,000 or so. And other than that, I'm trying to think of, what the other highlights are. After talking with Anne, so my own personal belief, and Anne agrees with this, is that once we are able to open the library to the public, members of the public are going to come back. I don't think that the library being used as a place where people gather, whether it is the kids after school or parents bringing their younger children or other members of the community coming in to use the computers at the library, or, just to read the newspaper. I don't think that's going to change that aspect of the library as we go forward. But I think that they're going to see a continued demand for electronic and internet services. So I don't know, Anne, if you want to add to that. I had asked you to put together some information about the number of books and electronic books that were taken out, some of the circulation data that you might have.
Right. I have some figures that begin with this fiscal year, July 2020. And in that year, that was the second month that we were open with curbside service. 45.5% of the circulations was digital.
Mhm.
But that was a really high number. The rest of the year so far, it's been in the 26 to 33% range. So the book, the printed book itself and DVDs and so forth are still quite popular, but the digital items are growing in popularity all the time. We had 8,486 digital checkouts in November and 8,757 the month before. But we still had books and DVDs and so forth going out in the 20,000 range. So the book is not dead. It's just many ways of getting at it.
Yeah. And the digital library is what the Overdrive program is. So if you
Yeah.
could talk a little bit about the Overdrive program.
The Overdrive program has a basic component that gets paid to the Minuteman Library Network, and there's a committee there that picks the books that should be purchased. And then there's another component to it called Overdrive Advantage, and that's fully in the control of each individual library. And mostly it's for books that are in heavy demand, bestseller type books that you can get on there, so that people don't have to wait a year to get a bestseller. The other components, there are magazines, RB Digital magazines, and there's a couple of services, Hoopla and Canopy, which are books, but also streaming movies. And they all make up the component of our digital collections at the moment. And that's a basic picture of the digital component to the library.
Yeah, and so right now the staff is being basically redeployed because the library is not open. So the staff is redeployed to the curbside pickup as well as doing reference and then working remotely and providing all of the remote programming as well as the digital service. And so the remote programming, you said you saw an increase in participation by members of
Children's Room is doing quite a bit of remote
Oh,
programming, but also the Friends of the Library are presenting their programs digitally. And we've had programs that they've presented that would go over the seating numbers that would fit in the community room. So that was really good.
No, I think it's great. And it's great that you were able to adapt to, different situation with respect to COVID, which was not easy, I know.
No, the deployment of people that is different is the part-time group. Part-timers historically have worked a half day or an evening shift or a morning shift. But the Board of Health asked us to please do 7-hour shifts so there wouldn't be a change of shifts in the middle of the day where we would have to stop and clean everything. We'd keep the same people all day rather than 2 shifts of people. It's worked out well for the library. People are really tired though. They're not used to working all day.
Yeah.
Dick?
Yeah, Louise, do I understand on the Overdrive program, you were recommending that it go from the state aid account to the general? And is that both elements or just the basic?
So I'm saying if we are, both. And if we are considering anything in the operating budget, I think that regardless of I know the library prioritized their requests differently, but what they're using right now is the Overdrive and Overdrive Plus, I think it's called.
Overdrive Advantage.
Overdrive Advantage. And those 2 programs are programs that they're going to continue to use. And if anything, they're going to increase the use in their Overdrive Advantage. And I think in terms of additional staffing, I think we would really have to think about, you know, what are the needs for additional staffing? Is this the right staff for the library? And I mean, there are other issues with staffing, not issues, but, you know, staffing result in additional benefits. So, you know, we have to consider the whole picture. But the overdrive, if we're going to consider anything, would be the one that I would say most should be moved to the top in terms of whether or not we consider it for the operating budget.
Just as a follow-up, the rationale for the digital communication specialists, is that because it's a skill you don't have, or just you need another body?
Sort of both. We do have some skills, but we'd like to get one person who can handle the whole program rather than splitting it up between people. It would be more efficient that way. But we could use another body in the reference department, answering questions and helping people.
Rick? You're muted.
I'm sorry. Just a continuing follow-up question on overdrive. Would it make sense to let the state continue to pay for one more year past COVID to kind of really assess utilization before we put it into the operating budget and let the state pay for it for a little while longer? Would we do it now when we're in the midst of it and we think, as opposed to waiting one fiscal year when we may know better? That was a question, so yeah.
I'm sorry. What is your name? I can't.
You're on mute, Carol.
I'm on mute?
No, Carol
No,
Thomas.
Carol Thomas is.
Carol Thomas, I'm serving as chair of the trustees here. This is not a new request, and it's not, this is a service overdrive, an overdrive advantage. These are services that are so basic to any library these days that if we were to, we would have screams from every corner of the community if we were not to have this. It's a very basic, I mean, really a basic service these days, and it's not brand new. This is not a pilot of any kind, if in case that was what you were thinking. This has been heavily used in the past years, not just this year. And it wouldn't be that it would be because of this year that it would get started to use much more. This is really not the case. This has been the trend, being used more and more every year. It was funded for 1 year, I believe, by the foundation, the Library Foundation. They will not pay for ongoing expenses. This is just an operating expense that every library in the system has. And they will not pay for that kind of thing year after year. And so then it went up because this body did not want to add it, and we've asked in the past. We would certainly not want to deprive our patrons of this basic service. And so we put it in the state aid expenditure the last year or two, at least. And that's a situation. This is not an experiment. This is not something that might or might not be in demand in the future. It is going to be in demand. It is in demand. It has been in demand the past several years, at least.
Use of it has grown.
Thank you.
A lot.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. A follow-up question. Is the state funding for this particular basic service in jeopardy, so much so that it would warrant moving it from the state to your budget?
Is that for Anne or for me?
Or Louise, maybe.
Probably Louise, but whoever would be able to know the answer to that or come
So
back.
it is not in jeopardy for this fiscal year. I think we don't know for fiscal year 22 whether it would be in jeopardy or not. But one of the thoughts with the overdrive is right now there's a basic subscription, which is a set amount. The overdrive advantage really is determined by Needham. And so if we freed up some of the basic subscription dollars in the state aid, we would then be able to expand what is being offered through the overdrive advantage. So you basically pay for, you're getting what you pay for. So if you pay for more, you're able to provide more with the overdrive advantage. I understood that right? Am I
More
correct?
copies of books that are included.
Right.
Yes.
So,
So
sorry.
that 26, not to belabor the point, but the 26,000 then is a fixed amount for which if we wanted to spend 32, the state would only give us 26? Or would the state give us what we asked for if we took the 26 and went to 32?
I think I'm confused by the question. This is something that we pay to Minuteman. As a member of Minuteman, the state does not give state aid based on what we're spending this on. They give state aid to the library, and the library trustees decide how it is to be spent.
Okay.
And can I just say that our policy, which we do have a policy on how we think those funds should be spent, which are on pilots, things that we want to experiment with, or saving up for big items. I believe a lot of the state aid was saved up so that it could help to design the building that we are now in, so that the town did not have to pay for some of those expenses, large, kind of big dollar expenses. So I suppose you could say, well, we should spend it down to zero and then, every year. But then we wouldn't be able to do pilots. We would not be able to meet emergencies, and we would not be able to, figure out what really was needed in town. We wouldn't be able to help with big projects. And we're looking at maybe wanting to do one, re-envisioning the space on the second floor because of changes in library services and what is needed.
And then one last question, I promise I'll be still. What is the balance of the state fund right now?
Anne, you could probably put your finger on that faster.
Okay. I believe it might be on the sheets that were passed out.
Give them $130,000 range.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah. So it hasn't changed significantly.
Okay.
Not all of that is uncommitted funding, though, correct?
$104,000 right now.
How much is committed out of the 100?
In this fiscal year?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Josh?
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. So I had a question. I guess, Ms. Thomas, you alluded to some of the other ways that you could spend the savings on the state aid money if the overdrive funding were moved to the budget. Do you have a plan on whether it would be spent mostly on the Advantage and increased Advantage subscription, or you mentioned redoing the second floor? Is this part of the 2 to 3 year planning phase, or do you have something identified now that you'd like to spend that on?
At the moment, we don't want to spend it on things we don't need. That's not our idea. We're not just trying to willy-nilly, spend it on something. We're just beginning the planning for the next strategic plan. And given that it's a little bit different when the building is closed to collect community wants and desires, feedback, it's likely that we won't.
This can go much longer.
Well,
I don't know what's happening here.
Tom, I think could you go on mute?
Oh.
Yeah. So in any case, the Overdrive Advantage subscription is really something we decide based on how many demands there are, requests for certain books. And when it gets up to a certain wait time or a certain number of request for a book, to keep it down to a particular period of time, like a month, you might have to wait. The librarians will order more copies of that book. So it's not always predictable. You're not saying, well, I'm just going to spend this much money on an advantage. You could change your parameters, the metric about when you order more copies of a particular book. But that is something that the staff handles. Honestly, I maybe Ann could tell you more about that. But in general, it's not that we would definitely spend more money on Advantage if we didn't spend it on the basic. It's really more a matter of the basic Overdrive is really a basic service, a basic library service these days. It's an operating expense if there ever was one. So that would be the reason I would really strongly push for having that included in the town appropriated budget. As far as what else we might do though, the plan for the second floor re-envisioning and maybe having a large machine that would handle returns and sort them to save staff time. That we have a preliminary study that's been contracted for, but of course, due to COVID, has not been performed. So we're kind of waiting for that to happen to see what the sort of the magnitude of the project might actually be. And state aid is going to be used for paying that for that contract. But there will, needless to say, be a larger planning contract necessary once we get a sense of where we might be going with that. So we probably do need to save up funds. We don't know.
Ann?
I will explain what the basic subscription is in Overdrive. It's something that we pay to the Minuteman network, and the charge is based on your usage of the Overdrive items. So every year when you renew your Minuteman network membership, you get a charge for Overdrive based on the budget that they want and figured from how much your customers use it. And obviously they use it a lot, $25,701.
Yeah. No, I do understand the need to have it. It seems like a great service. I think in years past, when this request to move the funding over to the budget hasn't passed, I think it's not because we doubt how valuable it is and how much the community uses it. I think it in part might be because we've asked what the plan is on how the savings would be spent from the state aid budget. So if it's possible to get us that information, I think it might be helpful for us to see in context. I know you have your own planning phase, and I don't want to push you if you're not ready, to make that decision yet. But it would just be good context to have.
Right.
May I respond to that?
Oh, sure, sorry.
Yeah, maybe it's redundant, but we are in a planning phase. We're in our last year of a 5-year plan, and we'll just be beginning the next, preparation of the next plan, which probably would be filed next October, I would guess. If we're on schedule with COVID, who knows? It can't be definite.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Rick?
For Louise, what would be the fund balance of the unencumbered trust funds? Do you have a number?
Of the unencumbered?
Yeah.
I do have that. So I actually believe the unencumbered is $104,000.
And do we have a fund balance for the Friends of the Library?
Friends of the Library. Oh, you're asking me so many questions.
This is my last one, I promise.
Yeah. For the trust fund accounts,
You don't have Friends money.
We don't have it.
they don't control the Friends money, but I do have. So for the trust funds account, the expenses on an annual basis are in the order of $90,000 a year.
88,000. Close. Very close.
88,000. So I talk in round numbers.
Good.
$88,000 a year or so.
Gotcha. And we don't have a balance for the Friends, even though I know we don't control the money.
No, they're a private organization.
Yeah, I don't have that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make one more comment, Madam Chair? So one of the things that I do want to say is that as the library is looking at their 5-year strategic plan, it would be good to look at job descriptions and to see whether you think any of the services that are needed are different, are going to be different going forward, and maybe adjust some of those job descriptions to look like the library of the future. It can be hard to do that, but I think, Anne, that's why you said earlier to me that you thought you would have a 2 to 3 year strategic plan as you see where the chips fall, and then the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Anne or comment?
Carol.
Carol, did you have a comment or?
I just wanted to say that we looked at some statistics because we were curious how Needham rated compared to some other libraries. And as I think it's been said before, we don't want to be the biggest spenders, but we also don't want to be at the bottom. Yeah, the latest publicly available information for libraries on spending is the fiscal 2018. But we looked that up. I think we gave you last year, I think it was still 2014, some outdated numbers, but as of 2018, the total, the appropriated municipal income per capita among Needham and a lot of other sort of, you might say comparable sized town libraries or similarly sort of situated type ones, we're at the bottom in terms of appropriated municipal income per capita. In 2018, Wellesley spent about $84 per capita out of their town budget. Needham spent $54. Belmont spent $87. They're a smaller town than we are. Winchester, smaller town, $86. Natick, $64. We're $54. And it goes down the line. Lexington, $75. We're $54. And then they also have a very interesting statistic, which is total operating income per capita. And that includes appropriated non-municipal, non-appropriated income to the library. We're still at the bottom when you consider probably funding from trust funds and from the supporting organizations, the Friends and the Foundation. We're at $57 or $58 as of 2018. Wellesley is at $95 or $96. Natick is at $82 as opposed to our $58 or $57. So there's quite a dramatic difference in the spending on our library. And some of that there's control over and some of it there isn't. The town budget you have control over as it goes to town meeting. The Friends only have so much money. The trust funds are only so much. So those are not necessarily expandable numbers, but I just thought I'd bring that up because I thought it was enlightening to see that we're pretty lean and mean, and maybe we're too lean and mean sometimes, because I think sometimes the lack of staff means that everybody's running like mad. There's less time to kind of think and consider and plan and lead, which are really important functions to have enough, little bit of a cushion so that things are done as well as they can be, not just done. So that would just be my my thought. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other, Dick, did you have a? Everybody's all set? Great. Well, Anne, thank you.
Thank you.
Carol,
Thanks for the chance to say our, our piece. Thank you.
thank you very much.
Okay. Good night.
All right.
Bye.
Madam Chair, I'll bring in the fire chief and Deb Bonanno to address the fire department budget.
Great. Thank you.
I am going to recuse myself from participating in this budget since my son is a firefighter.
There we are. Hey, everybody.
Good evening. How are you?
Good, thank you. On this snowy, soon to be snowy evening.
Yeah.
Everyone's thrilled with that, I'm sure.
Oh,
But
yeah.
the good side is we aren't meeting in person and having to sweep off the cars tonight. We'll wait till tomorrow to do that, so.
Exactly. So Rick, do you want to start? Introduce?
Sure, I'd be happy to introduce the FY22 budget. The chief, Deb, and I met at Station 1 a couple weeks ago and went over the budget. And let me just go over some particulars, and then I'll turn it over to the chief. In FY20, the department generated $1,069,374, and that's up about $48,314. And in conjunction with its core mission, namely public safety, the department generates that revenue referenced above with 80 staff members, and that's talking about the 8 additional firefighters that were brought on, 2 ladder trucks, 3 engines, 3 ambulances, 1 brush truck, 1 fire alarm truck, a pickup truck, a terrain vehicle, and they're all housed in the brand new Station 1 public safety building and in temporary quarters at the Old Hillside School. The department responded to approximately 4,029 calls in FY20, and as seems to be custom lately, 51% of those calls were EMS as opposed to structure. Currently, there are 4 vacant positions in the department and 7 positions at their longevity maximum. If you recall, the SAFER grant began in FY19 and covered salaries and benefits for those 8 new firefighters. In this budget, the grant will cover 35% or $143,000 of that. The firefighters are divided into 4 units, 3 with 17 firefighters and 1 with 16. However, each unit is populated on average about 15 or 16 firefighters a shift. If staffing levels drop below 15 firefighters per shift, 1 ladder truck and 1 ambulance are removed from service due to lack of personnel. In past years, this situation occurred periodically throughout each month to average around 10 days a month when equipment was taken out of service. Now that we have a full complement, this does not occur, which is excellent for the town and our ability to cover mutual aid. In order to maintain the appropriate service delivery staffing levels due to earned accrued vacation and personal time, $1,101,090 is proposed. This is up about $123,000 and due in part to those new positions. In order to fulfill the responsibilities associated with normal course of business, mutual aid, callback, storms, etc., over time, the FY22 proposed budget uses $325,000 for this float projection. That's approximately up $50,000 from FY20. Here again, it's because of a greater population in the cohort. The current collective bargaining agreement expired in June 30th of 20 for both units. The proposed FY budget line item is up 4.4%, inclusive of current step and longevity increases. Is not reflective of the money that will be associated with a signing of that collective bargaining agreement when it is finalized. The fuel line continues to be split between vehicle and supply and reflects decreases in FY20 to 4,436. Utilization is based on FY20 consumption levels unleaded at 7,000 plus gallons, and diesel 6,000 plus, with $2.45 down, or 58 cents per gallon for gasoline, and 70 cents down for diesel. In terms of DSR4, there's a 1 for 3,329 for a stair chair. I'll let the chief talk to that if he wishes to in detail, but that's the chair that's used to bring people up and down stairs, and we have 3 ambulances and only 2 chairs, and so this will put a 3rd chair in that ambulance. There are 2 major items in the capital budget. Going to continue the annual replacement of personal protective gear for the firefighting turnout stuff in 2 sets for 20% of the department personnel each year. The first replacement cycle began in FY19. This cost is $43,358. And the second one is a proposed initiative to replace the self-contained breathing apparatus to meet current standards. That's the scuba tanks that the firefighters wear in their backs to protect them from inhaling smoke and toxins. Of the 4,019 department calls referenced earlier, these units are worn 1,023 times, and so they're used a lot. Currently, there are 41 such devices in use in the department. It's proposed that 18 of them be replaced this year or in FY22. This includes 18 packs because there's 2 air tanks per pack, 2 air cylinders to house that air, and 66 face masks. So each firefighter has their own for health, sanitary, and hygiene purposes. So they replace 18 units at the cost of $192,000. And then the fleet, there is the proposed replacement of a 2016 deputy fire chief vehicle at $62,500 and 1 2008 ambulance at approximately $353,800 scheduled in FY22. Absent a finalized collective bargaining agreement and with the CFR grant still in place, the FY22 proposed budget of $9,395,969 represents an overall increase of $382,000 or 4.2%. Thank you for allowing me to introduce the budget. Chief, I'll turn it over to you if there are any things relative to DSR4s and capital you wish to speak to, and how are the 8 new firefighters working out, and was it a great payoff?
Thank you, Rick. The 8 new firefighters has really been a game changer for the fire department. It's brought us into an area where we can fully staff 2 ambulances, which are at each station. So we have much better paramedic coverage throughout town. It gives us the opportunities to do simultaneous calls at the same time without relying on people coming from other communities. On the fire ground with those other, with the extra firefighters, it allows us to man the ladder company with 4, which is, the standard is 6 through the NFPA. Most departments run it like we have in the past with 2, but by having the extra people in the ambulance, when they show up at a fire, one of those aerial pieces, depending on which side of town it's on, they will hop on. So at the fire, they will have 4. So it's not as if we are having 4 firefighters sitting around waiting for a fire. They're fully functioning on the EMS level, as Rick pointed out. That is about 51% of our calls this past fiscal year. So they're working out very well. It also gives us an opportunity to maintain a mutual aid force of 1 engine and 1 ladder when called upon. For many years, we're at 1 engine or 1 ladder. So we weren't really fulfilling our mutual aid obligation to some of the communities. And by doing so, it allows our people to get further experience in the fire ground. And when they're back in our community, it makes them that much better of firefighters. In that better experience is beneficial to the community. On the capital items, we're looking for a stair chair. We probably could have maybe put that in the budget itself, but we wanted to make sure it's somewhat costly. It's in the low thousands range, but that is important to have. Currently, we have, I believe, two, one on each ambulance, and we have a third backup ambulance. So we're stretching out the lifespan of the ambulances somewhat. Rather than churning them in and not getting too much money for them, we keep the third one in service as a backup and available for a third call if we have staffing in the station at that time. So to have that stair chair, those are important because it helps save back injuries, and it helps cut down on liability of dropping someone if we're carrying them down with our arms or in a household chair. The people are strapped up in those, and it's a tool that's made for the job. Again, we're looking for the ongoing funding of the secondary PPE, the turnout coat, the helmet, the gloves, the pants, the whole ensemble. So these pieces of equipment have a lifespan of about 10 years. And so rather than hit the town up for 72 of these every 10 years, we thought that it was better to run a program where 20% is replaced each year. So each firefighter will get a new set every 5 years, and that set will be retired after 10 years. So they should, in theory, have one that's new, one that's 5 years old, and it would go on that way. And then when the 5-year one is 10 years old, then they would get another new one. So it's just a way to sort of spread that out. And then the other thing we're looking for, which is costly, is the SCBA ensembles. Each firefighter does not get their own. The SCBAs are put in each seat in the vehicle. So when the firefighters are working, they will use those in the seats so that we don't have to supply, again, 71, 75, whatever it is, number of those. But with each firefighter does get his own face piece. And that's for sanitary reasons, and that's the protocol. So we have tried for 3 years now to get a federal grant to buy these. And each year we've been denied. And I've gone back to the FEMA people and say, so what happened with our grant request? And they would look into it and they say, well, we scored really high on the grant itself, but it comes down to a need issue, I guess. And so far they have been reluctant to feel that we had the need here in Needham to be awarded the grant. However, the need for the equipment is there. Again, this equipment has a lifespan of about 10 years. It will not be serviced by the service people if it's beyond 2 standards old. And what we're looking to replace are equipment that are at that level. So getting parts and replacing things and getting them fixed on is a real problem for us going forward. And to give you an idea on where this situation is, I'm using an out-of-date pack that is borrowed from the town of Westwood. So because my pack was put on in engine because it was better than what they had. So we really need to get those. I know it's a costly item, but the firefighters use those regularly. They'll put them on, as Rick said, probably about 1,000 calls. They actually have to utilize them on a smaller number of fires, smoke conditions, hazardous materials, and that sort of thing. So when they go on the call, a lot of times it's it'll be an alarm, a fire, and we go, and then we find out maybe it's false, but they will be wearing it then. And so every fire they go to, they have to have this on, or else they cannot fight the fire. And as we know, if you look at after action reports where there's been line of duty deaths, one of the things that has been critical is the SCBA is either out of date, broken, or failed in some way. It seems like that comes into play quite a bit. So I will answer any questions you may have.
Dick?
Yeah, Chief, I'm looking at the overtime amount. I'm over on page 22, and it looks like the overtime's going up like 12% over last year. What's driving that?
Some of it has to do with more people, and some of it has to do with not being able to fill vacancies. So we have currently 4 vacancies. One of the issues here in Needham with hiring firefighters is we want to get paramedics to maintain the ambulance staff at that level. And last time, so we're still in the civil service realm, and they give a test every 2 years, and those lists get exhausted very quickly. Last time we had our request in on the very first day the list came out, and while we were interviewing people, they were getting cards from 10, 20, even 30 different communities. So there's a tremendous need for these people, and there's not enough to go around. The issue why we try to stay on top of that, but the issue this year has been with the virus. They were supposed to give an entry-level exam in April. That never occurred. So we've been out, the current list has basically been exhausted since sometime a year ago, last fall. And so they finally started the exam process in the fall this year, where they gave the PAT, the physical aptitude test first, and they're giving the written test as we speak, spreading it out so that they can do it in a safe manner. We're hoping to have a list come out in February. So having 4 vacant positions, and then we've had people out with COVID-related illnesses and so forth. Basically, it's all that sort of adds up. That and the additional people on the department sort of adds into the mix why the overtime's gone up.
Your base salary, does it assume those 4 positions are filled, or they're not filled?
It's assuming
It's assuming that they're filled.
Yeah, it's assuming we're filled. We're budgeting for that, yes.
For budgetary purposes, it is fully staffed.
Is that a little double counting? Then you say the overtime is to cover for the fact you got 4 vacant positions, yet your base salary assumes the 4 basic positions are going to be filled. Is that double counting?
No, because you're assuming that the positions are filled, but then when there's vacancies, they have to be filled at an overtime rate.
That I understand.
Right.
But if you don't fill the positions, then you've got the money in the basic salary pool to cover the overtime expense.
Right, but one is assuming that we're not going to have those positions vacant for the entire year as well.
Okay. I have a little trouble with that, but okay.
Any other questions?
Steve, yeah, I have a question back to the open positions. How long have you carried? I just can't remember from last year. How long have you carried, for these positions that are open, or? mean, it seems like it's a perennial problem, isn't it?
It is a perennial problem because, obviously people retire, and the way the system works, it takes upwards to a year for someone to leave and then to get someone in there to replace. So we have to call for a list, then we have to interview, then they have to take another PAT, and then they have to wait for a very long time to get into the fire academy before they come on. And then the fire academy is about 9 weeks. So it's a long process. In this group, we had one retirement in January. Then we had another just as the pandemic started, which was probably around March. And then we had somebody go out, I believe in April on a heart-related thing. And then we had somebody switch careers to Homeland Security, which was kind of out of the blue. So that's where that was probably around June, I think, or June or July, something like that.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, just going back to Dick's question about the overtime, is the $125,000 incremental change that I'm looking at in overtime, is that just the premium amount? So if you're doing time and a half, is that the half?
Yeah.
I don't think you can look at it like that. The overtime amount takes into consideration full coverage for all vacations and half coverage for personal days. But in addition to that, there's $325,000 that's added to that to cover sick coverage, mutual aid calls, any kind of callbacks, storm coverage, all your miscellaneous coverages. So if you take into consideration that, as well as the fact that there was a cost of living increase and will be another cost of living increase, I think that is the fair way to look at it.
Okay.
Gary?
So given that these positions weren't filled during the current year, does that mean that there's money being given back to the town for salaries not paid out?
I don't think we'll know that till June 30th.
But that's how it should work, correct? Just
In theory. I mean, there always ends up being unforeseen circumstances, so I would not say that 4 salaries will be given back.
Well, wouldn't it at least be half of 4 salaries have been given back in the sense that we've gone through half the fiscal year?
I think
At a
that's going to
minimum?
be hard to determine at this point because there's a lot of coverage for COVID right now. So I'm not really sure that we can say 4 salaries are absolutely going to be presented at the end of the year to turn back to the general fund.
That was what I said. I said we've gone through 6 months, so shouldn't it be at least half?
I don't know.
I don't know if you can look at what we do in the same light as maybe other places where half the year, half of the budget would be gone. In our realm, these things sort of go from incident to incident, so to speak. And we could have a bad week. For instance, Saturday we had a firefighter come to work, and at 3:30 in the morning he went home sick. And on Sunday, it was determined that he was COVID positive. So now that entire group is out. So, that happened today. So in the first half of the year, is that going to happen in the second half? And then in the second half of the year, we have 10 of those situations. So from my perspective, it's very difficult to look at some of this stuff in that linear fashion where, okay, we're halfway home, so we must have spent halfway of the salary budget.
But I think in theory, I think what we're trying to get at is you've allocated overhead for need. You're allocating or you're budgeting for overhead for a need because you have unfilled positions. I guess in theory there should be, and I understand things happen obviously, and isn't how you operate or run that department. But you can understand why there might be an expectation that at the end there should be some money left over in the combination of salary and overtime if the positions are unfilled.
I would agree with that. And I believe Deb can confirm this, that no money is squandered over there at all. But there is need that goes along with our profession in the mission that we're supposed to fulfill for the community. So sometimes that ends up being costly.
In theory, though, I think the point they're trying to get at, in theory, at the end of the fiscal year, if there's funds left that haven't been spent, by definition, that would be turned back over to the town, would it not?
Correct, yes.
And
yes, I think Dave can attest to that happens regularly, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
Chief, I had a question. Are there parts of your budget that are expense items specifically related to COVID that once everybody has the vaccine won't necessarily be repeated going forward? Have you identified that part of your budget that might be COVID related?
Surprisingly, or maybe counterintuitively, no. Because we operate EMS all the time. And so have we used more PPE this year? Yes. Will that really change in the future? Not that much. And here's why. We've gotten a lot from the federal government and from MEMA and from some donations along the way to help with that extra. The other piece to that too is while our COVID related calls have risen, overall, at least in the springtime, a lot of the calls had dropped because people were at home. We had fewer car accidents, fewer broken legs on the soccer field and that sort of thing. So we're dealing with it quite a bit, and after the vaccine, I hope we never deal with it again. But our PPE in our costs should be pretty similar to what they are.
Thank you. Dick?
Yeah, Chief, what's the, speaking of vaccination, what's your understanding of vaccination schedule for your troops?
I'm still hopeful that we will have it available by the end of the year. I heard the date, December 28th, thrown out. I don't know if that's accurate. If not, then certainly after the first of the year. We are in tier 1. So as I understand it, there's 3 tiers in tier 1. There's tier 1A, B, and C, and we're 1B. So I think the first wave of vaccines that came in to the state, I believe there were some 59,000. So I don't think that's us, unless if there's a lot of anti-vaxxers that work in the hospitals, which I would suspect there isn't. So we would be getting that, we would be in that next shipment, I believe. And so the sooner the better in my mind.
You anticipated my next question, was, is everyone going to get it? If people decline, are they permitted to decline? And
I think my game plan is to strongly urge and to try to point out the benefits of the vaccine and debunk some of the limitations that have been presented. But am very reluctant on mandating it because I think mandating it will result in a massive, rebellion against it. And people who would have gotten it won't. So if I believe most of our people want to get it. And I've been surprised. We have a number of firefighters who are nurses, and they've been able to get it in the very first wave, some yesterday and some tomorrow. And some of those people, I was a little bit surprised that they were looking forward to it. So I think most of us have got COVID-itis to the worst degree, and we just want to get past this.
Josh?
I had a question about the emergency management coordinator position. I think maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but at one time I think it was kind of split between fire and public health. Is that still the case?
No, that's a fire position now.
Okay. And is that filled currently, or is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's currently filled, but the Michael Leffen is filling it currently. He's doing a great job, but he's also a military person, and he's being deployed to Qatar. I think he's going to Qatar for 6 months. So we will be trying to fill that with a temporary position.
Okay. I think I guess with all the COVID, how has that role supported most of the COVID efforts in town?
So that's been, so the position is under the fire budget, but it's utilized throughout the town. And it's been a very important position going back to the beginning of the pandemic, keeping that EOC running along. Earlier, Rebecca Ping, who was our emergency management coordinator, handled that, and now that Michael's here, he's doing it. And in between, we did have a temporary person. So that has been a very important person in the COVID response by the town, which, by the way, I don't know if all of you appreciate the level that the town has put into this. They've really done a remarkable job, and I've had people from other communities who are looking at those stats saying, how is Needham doing so well? And I think it has to do with setting up that EOC. We had our EOC, for those of you who don't know the vernacular, Emergency Operations Center. We had ours set up before the state did. So we've been on top of this for a long time, and a lot of that, most of that is down in public health. And so the emergency management coordinator has worked very closely with them in tracking everything that we need, PPE, and so forth, and keeping in touch with MEMA and FEMA in those regards as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Condon? Great. Well, thank you very much for your time and for all that you do. And
okay, thank you very much. And
thanks, Chief.
I hope everybody got their snow blower fixed over at the garden center. The last couple of days has been hundreds going in and out of there. So hopefully tomorrow we all dig out and we're back at it the next day. Thank you very much.
all right, be safe.
Night.
Good night, Chief. Good night, Deb.
Actually did a test run with mine today.
Madam Chair, the next budget is the Finance Committee budget, and the presenter is already a panelist.
Okay, so as in every year, there's not much to that budget. Very important individual attached to the budget, but level funded budget, underfunded budget, frankly. I guess, Louise, I'll ask you, is there anything in this remote world that you've thought about that we should have, that, or something that would make your life easier that we don't have included?
No, nothing significant. I mean, I've talked to Roger about a couple things like, getting Adobe Professional or whatever, something like that, but nothing that I don't think needs to come out of this budget. Dave, I don't think that would need to be in this budget, would it?
It's not in the budget. We take care of that cost.
Yeah, so things like that, no. So Roger hooks me up when I needed a camera, and I have a brand new camera. But yeah, no, so that's all I would need.
Okay.
So Carol and I didn't help you out by taking our books online or wanting our books online, which didn't work actually.
Well, I was too slow to get back to Dave, so they made the whole, contingent of them, but.
But the school budget books are online. That's a
Yeah.
plus. Rick?
Yeah, so that everyone could
Yeah.
see that.
Louise, does the town pay for your internet access, internet use in your home? When you
No, I think there's no way to parse that out. I mean, I don't, basically that's there's no extra cost.
well, you have a 20% position, and so for the time in which you're doing town work on service on that device, is it fair that you're paying for that out of your own pocket?
Yes, I'm paying for that out of my own pocket, but I would have anyways. I mean, when I go on Amazon.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, you're not putting me on the spot. I mean, that we all have, that's like, you don't pay for me to heat my house either, but even though, I work here, I don't know.
Okay. My only thought is it's your home office, and a good portion of that home office utilization is for town service. And so should that be in the finance budget in some way? That's all.
In a perfect world, if you could figure it out, it'd be great, but I just don't think there's any way to do it.
What you're saying is there's no incremental cost.
Yes, exactly. I'm living the same thing. I've got the equipment from the town. So.
But it's not a question of incremental. Out of 100% of a week that you're using it, a significant piece of that is for town business. And so in essence, could we not determine the time you spend on town business and offset it against the actual cost for the week and figure out what that cost may be and then stick it in the budget? That's the point I'm making, but I'll be still. I just.
Rick, don't talk to our associates in my law firm. Don't give them that idea, okay?
Nor the folks that work with me. No, but
okay.
This is a tad different.
Keep that to yourself.
Does that mean when we get a vaccine, Louise is going to give us gas receipts?
Yeah, right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I could just add, there are no town employees that are getting paid for their use of their internet at home, working remotely, and even before COVID-19, employees who are working remotely at any time, they're not compensated any additional money. And Louise would be subject to the same personnel policies that all other employees, and if one employee is being reimbursed, we're opening up Pandora's box.
Right. Yeah, I'll be
Mr. Conley's comment.
Right. I'll be still, but in all town employees, they come to work and have an office, either in a truck or in an office in a building that the town owns. In Louise's case, her home is her home office. And so I see that as a difference. And then throw something at me and I promise to be quiet. But I see it as significantly different.
Quiet all night long and yes.
I see it significantly different. And so it's a unique town employee because other town employees don't work solely out of their office at home, as you do. So that's.
I mean, arguably, I have.
If I sufficiently embarrassed you enough, I'll be still.
All right, so is there anything else on the Finance Committee budget? Then that's it. And we can move to the school budget update.
Okay, Madam Chair, there are a number of individuals, and I'll start bringing them in. The superintendent and the assistant superintendent of finance are here, as well as a number of school committee members So I will start letting them in.
Great, thank you.
Carol did a great with the hitting the agenda.
Trying.
Madam Chair, everyone is in.
Great. Dan Gutenkantz, school committee members, thank you for coming tonight. Dan, I'll just turn it to you if you want to give us an update on 2021.
Will do. Well, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair, members of the Finance Committee. I think when we met earlier in the fall, and I think we met in the summer and earlier in the fall, and we promised you that we would come back with an update on FY21. The last time I believe we talked to you, we had discussed the idea of perhaps a need to go to town meeting for some additional appropriation, and wisely everyone agreed to put that request off. Anne tonight is going to share with you a brief 3 or 4 slide PowerPoint presentation, if that's okay. She has also forwarded to Louise Misgard, and actually I forwarded to Anne too late. So it's received. You all should have, and Louise will pass on to you, a spreadsheet. We won't go through the spreadsheet in detail, but certainly please review it, and you can take questions tonight or later, and also a copy of the slideshow we're going to show. I guess the headline is this. At this point in time, given the pandemic and the health emergency, the Needham Public Schools believes that we do not have a deficit, and that we believe at this point that we should have sufficient funds to continue to improve our learning programs for all of our students, and also end the year with a balanced budget. That can always change. We would certainly let the Finance Committee and the School Committee know. But right now, after several things have shifted, fortunately, in our favor, we believe that we can continue the school year, provide the programs that we want, and also possibly provide for some improvements. So with that, and if Mr. Davison will allow, we'll have Anne take us through the 2 documents that she's provided.
She should be able to share.
Okay, great.
While Anne is doing this, I just want to point out, I think the Finance Committee especially appreciates this. Two of our colleagues, Dave Davison and Ann Galati, have had a pretty unreal task this year of not only concluding the FY20 budget and submitting reports to the state, which is an enormous task, but trying to figure out the FY21 budget, including grants that are significantly involved and complicated, and made complicated by the federal government, frankly, and not made easier by Massachusetts, and then planning for FY22. It's been an enormous balancing and juggling act that, in my view, I know personally Anne has done an amazing job with, and I know by extension Dave, certainly, whom Anne relies on, have done some pretty amazing work along with their staff. It's just really remarkable what they're able to pull together on behalf of the community. So I want to thank both of them right now.
Thank you, Dan. I'm just going to take you through a brief 5-slide presentation. I intentionally kept the format of this presentation similar to what you saw in September, so that you will be able to go back and compare and contrast where we were from where we are today.
At the moment, it does not look like we will be in a deficit position. We may not have any funds at the end of the year, but we may, it doesn't appear that we will be incurring a deficit as we had feared we might. It looks as if this is just a broad brush stroke picture of our revenues and expenditures in excess of budget this year. You can tell by looking at the sources of funds column, the last line indicates that we might have about 5.9 million in anticipated resources. And then if you look in the right-hand column, uses of funds against 5.9 million in projected expenditures. We've gone through the sources of funds last time that we met. They're very largely the same. We had some circuit breaker reserves that we carried forward. We didn't spend our circuit breaker allocation last year in anticipation of needing resources to combat COVID-19. We carried those forward. We indicated to you that we had implemented 2 different budget holdbacks this year. We implemented a 35% holdback of all supply and service budgets back in July. And then in October, we tried to implement another 15%. We were only able to recoup about 7.5. It was just too deep. Departments couldn't cut further. In addition to that, we have access to about $1.4 million in school COVID-19 grants. We anticipate using approximately $600,000 of municipal COVID-19 money. We do believe that we will have some salary savings within our budget preliminarily after completing our FY22 budget, which gives us a peek at what the savings were from our hiring season early in the year. We think that that's about 600,000. And then we have about 100,000 in miscellaneous other sources, including revolving funds and capital. We intend to use those $5.9 million in anticipated resources against 2 broad categories of expense. The first is approximately $6 million worth of remote academy, hybrid learning, health and safety expenses, all related to COVID-19. This year, we don't believe, in fact, we think that we're going to pretty much break even on some of the other budget items that are budget busters for us in different years, including sped tuitions and other things. So we think that we're actually going to be able to meet our expenses with that 5.9 million in anticipated resources. So looking closely at the expenditure side of what I've just presented, I indicated that there were 2 general buckets of expense. One is sort of the remote academy hybrid health safety bucket. The other is sort of all other items bucket. Within remote academy, the hybrid learning, this is the tally of what we have spent to date. We have spent about $1 million on remote learning technology. The biggest component of that was issuing devices to our elementary students so that they could complete remote learning with a device. And this was either an iPad or a Chromebook. It also includes some iPads and Chromebooks for teaching staff, as well as some administrative staff that did not have access to a laptop or any kind of a remote device. Additionally, we've hired about 25 staff members, teachers and TAs for the Remote Learning Academy. And as Dan has described this earlier, the Remote Learning Academy is really a 9th school that we had to open in Needham to provide remote learning for our students. We have about $200,000 worth of additional sort of instructional supplies and services related to the Remote Learning Academy. The biggest component of that is about $150,000 for TECA, which is the high school's version of remote learning. We did not hire staff. We have not hired any staff yet for the high school. Students are receiving those remote learning services through a contracted agency. In addition, we've spent about $700,000 on the health safety expenses listed there: PPE, hand sanitizer, plexiglass, signage, furniture moving and storage. That's to achieve the so that we can achieve our 6 feet of physical distancing, testing, health assessments. We also have approximately $1 million worth of revenue deficits. And what those are revenue deficits within our fee-based programs. In September, we had come to you to indicate that the biggest deficit we expected was going to be in our nutrition services program, our cafeteria program. And that is because we had pretty limited ability to reduce staffing because the same number of staff were required to staff the school schedule. However, we were selling vastly fewer numbers of meals, which in turn resulted in much less revenue. Since that time, two things have happened. The first, I should say that we had anticipated about $1.5 million deficit there. $500,000 of that would have been related to our nutrition services folks performing light touch cleaning and sanitizing in the schools. Since that time, two things have happened for nutrition services. The first is that our nutrition services folks simply weren't able to schedule cleaning in the schools. We had to rely on building maintenance staff to do that. So we didn't incur the $500,000 we thought we were likely to there. In addition, the $1 million deficit we'd expected for food services really was cut in half when USDA, which has been a federal agency that has been extremely responsive during COVID-19, allowed Needham and other districts that have a fairly small percentage of students on free and reduced lunch to sell meals to the community. So we have been able to sell meals to not only Needham students, but to all students living in the town of Needham, including students who do not attend the Needham Public Schools. In addition, USDA provided universal free meals to all students this year, and they just recently extended that authorization through the end of the year, which means that there is no student in Needham who has to pay for a meal. And what that has done, the combination of allowing us to serve to the community as well as making those meals free, is it has really boosted demand among the community for the meals that we're able to sell. So we've been able to reduce by half the anticipated deficit that we have in this program. So other components of the deficit are preschool. We're only able to enroll preschool students in our half-day program as opposed to a full-day program because of the physical distancing requirement and restrictions. So we had another $200,000 deficit there. And there are some other fee-based programs that are incurring deficits directly due to physical distancing and some of the complications of COVID-19. In addition, there are some other instructional services that I don't know if Dan might want to speak to briefly.
Well, I just, we as I mentioned earlier, I think there are other instructional pieces that the school administration staff needs to talk about to make sure that we're providing the best experience for our students for the rest of the year. And I anticipate meeting with the school committee soon to talk about what we might be able to do to strengthen our hybrid and remote learning academy for all our students. Not there yet, but certainly we'll let you know as that unfolds.
Thank you, Dan. Some of the other school needs, which are in the bucket on the right, this year has been something of a blessing in terms of some of the other accounts which tend to be budget busters for us. Special education tuition and professional services, we anticipate only a mild relatively speaking, deficit in that program. That program can run deficits that are much larger due to unanticipated move-ins and other things. A lot of that anticipated or projected deficit at this point has to do with some of the compensatory services that we're required to provide to students on IEPs who weren't able to access those services for some reason since March as a result of COVID-19. So that is a part of what we're dealing with. In addition, we are facing some deficit in our yellow bus program, in part because we are just simply not able to sell as many seats because of the need to social distance on the buses. And because we depend on those fees to pay for the buses, we have some deficits in that program that's likely to be offset by some savings in special education transportation. We've been really proactive at renegotiating all of our transportation contracts so that we're paying reduced rates for COVID-19. And then, as we indicated to you last time we met with you, we had intended to help to address the deficit that we were facing by combing through our positions and holding as many vacant as we can this year. And so we've been able to hold just under 5 positions, a net number of 5 positions vacant, and that has helped us with some of our expenses. This is just a snapshot of how the school department is spending its coronavirus relief fund grant. The spending plan, changes daily, it seems, in part to simply make sure that we're able to completely spend down and take full advantage of these monies. We intend to spend some on technology and some safety items, and a lot of the Remote Learning Academy will be charged to this grant. And then here's a quick visual of maybe what the school department might need from the municipal coronavirus relief fund grant. A lot of technology on this one, some safety stuff. And that's really the presentation. I'm happy to address or answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Sam.
I had a question. What happens to the deployment of the technology to the elementary school students at the end of the year?
Dan, do you want to take that, or would you like?
Well, it's our technology, and I would imagine the technology is the Chromebooks and iPads. I forget the shelf life, the useful life of them, and I think the iPads are longer than the Chromebooks, but we will use them. And I would imagine, John, that more so than before, and because of our experience, I'm sure that those tools will be something that our teachers will be using in the classroom beyond the pandemic from now on. And they may be a tool that occasionally, makes its way home, or might become a permanent part of what students have as well as their backpack. So we do intend to use them. Teachers have been pretty creative about that. That will continue beyond the pandemic.
The curriculum has already been modified in a lot of ways to incorporate those devices, even on a going forward basis.
Dick?
Yeah, Anne, I understood you to say that some of the cleaning expenses you thought would be performed by the cafeteria staff weren't, and that was being done. Was that by
building maintenance
within the town, and will their budgets go up proportionately because of that?
The cleaning, the light touch cleaning, and we're talking about some of the sanitizing, the wiping down of handrails and things and doorknobs in the school. That is being done by folks employed by the building maintenance department, and their department will be incurring those expenses. It was a scheduling issue. We couldn't make it work with our staff.
So that's not, while it's a savings to the school department, it isn't necessarily a savings to the town.
That's correct.
And the plan, Dick, initially was that we were going to have 2 teams of people working. We were going to have disinfectant teams. There are two members of each team. I think there are 3 at the high school, and they're hired by SJ Services, our contractor. The town building maintenance is paying for them. I believe using part of the Municipal CARES Act, but I think only a portion of it. And the idea was that the disinfectant team was going to work, and they were going to be complemented by some nutrition service workers who were also going to be doing disinfecting work, believing that, as we were advised by our public health officials, it was necessary to make sure that hygiene is a big part of our planning. What we've learned, however, is that as much as hygiene and surfaces and the transmission of the virus certainly is a factor on tables and door handles, it's not as important as ventilation and mask wearing and physical distancing. So we've actually learned that the disinfectant teams that do exist are doing a great job, and it really is not necessary to complement them with more staff, which we couldn't make happen anyway. So it was it came together in that way. It was a good plan. It couldn't happen, and it turns out that we did not need to do as much as we originally thought.
Anne?
Yes.
And Anne, so as you sit now, you do not need additional funds for the 2021 budget, but there's 5 to 6 months left of 2021. So what could change that would make that not true? What are the things that you worry about, could shift?
Sure. Some of the things that could change are, so I have only taken a pretty high level pass at the salary budget. As you know, most of the school budget is people. We're a service entity, so 85% of our budget is in salary. So I've only taken a pretty high level pass at some of the potential salary saving that you can see is helping us to finance some of our COVID related costs. I have yet to take, and will shortly begin to take, a deep dive into what the cost of some of the COVID, the extended FMLA cost is for folks who are on leave. There's a lot of sort of hidden expense that we're incurring in the area of leaves and subs, and I'll try to figure out where we sort of are able to land the year with that. So that won't be for another month or two, and just that'll take me that long to kind of go through it. So that's something that could change the picture a little bit. If new needs that come up, additional needs, that might be something as well.
I think, Carol, in addition, if anything from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the governor's office comes out, which does happen. It did yesterday, actually, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They changed regulations regarding learning time. Now, Needham right now meets that threshold, but this has been part of the problem, is that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the governor's office have come up with new rules in the middle of the game that we have to respond to. So if that continues, that could impact some of the things that we have to do.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Dan, Ann, or the school committee? Josh?
Oh, thank you. So Dan, you mentioned briefly in your introduction about remote learning, and you're looking into maybe making some changes, if I understood. I was just curious if you could expand upon that.
It's early to say, Josh, and thanks for the question. We recently, in November, conducted a survey of students, staff, and families to gauge where folks believe there might be some needs. There is no question that within the community, and I'm sure some members of the Finance Committee have heard this, that there is some clear dissatisfaction with the amount of contact time students who are at home learning have with their teachers. I'm dissatisfied with it. And it's frustrating to our teachers and especially our younger parents who are struggling to perhaps work from home or balance their job outside of the home and also manage a first grade student's learning experience. This whole enterprise depends on our families supporting their children at home, particularly for our youngest students. And so we have been thinking a lot lately about that survey data, my observations and the observations of our principals and teachers to try to figure out, are there things that we can do with resources that we might have to strengthen that experience. I'm not there yet with the plan. I hope to be soon. I want to work with our school committee, obviously, and with the Needham Education Association, representing all of our employee groups, to say, you know, what is it we can do to strengthen this experience now that we're halfway through the year. A couple of ideas, and we'll work through them, and certainly report back to the Finance Committee as well.
Thanks for that.
Great. Anyone else? So last question, Dan, is tomorrow a remote school day or a snow day?
Well, what are you doing at St. Seb's? I'll ask you.
It's a remote day.
All right, well, that's what we're going to do then.
How much heat are you going to take for that?
It's already come in. But, you know, our students have and staff, they have a 2-week, it's the first time they've had the longest winter break in my tenure. So hang in there for a couple of days and that break will be coming. Keep the learning going. It is the idea.
Yeah.
And maybe take a break in mid-morning for a snowball fight with your younger brother.
Do you miss riding around with Dick Mercer on the snowstorm?
Well, unfortunately, Rick will not be part of the scene, but Karis and I already have our plans to, not tomorrow. I think tomorrow's pretty clear. We won't be riding around early. This storm this one's already been mailed home, I think. But in the future, yes, Karis and I will channel Rick and we'll be driving around town 4 o'clock in the morning when we need to.
Be safe.
Thanks.
All right, well, Dan,
Thanks
thank
for a
you
great
very
job,
much.
guys.
Yeah, really, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Have a great holiday, all. Thank you for your support.
You too.
You too.
Okay, with that, does anybody else have any updates at all? Tom?
I'm not sure if it's an update or if it's even appropriate to bring it up. So this library thing, we've gone through every year, we have the same issue. And I don't think any of us have the issue with the concept of them needing the overdrive basic. That's not really the issue. The issue is how to manage the state aid funds. And we have the same conversation every year. I didn't know if anybody had a clever idea of how we should get past it. Should we work with the library to come up with what's an appropriate use of the state aid funds? You know, can it be part of the ongoing operating expense? I just don't know how to get past this. They obviously want it out of there, and we know it's an operational issue, operational expense. But
Rick?
There seems to be a mindset of the library folk that just because it needs to be in the operating budget because it's basic to library service delivery, the state shouldn't pay for it, we should. And I've always been of the belief that if the state is going to pay for it and the funds aren't in jeopardy, so what if it's so germane to library science? Let the state or some other entity pay for it. But there seems to be a thought among them that they just need to get that stuff into the operating budget And that's why I asked the question, what was in the trust fund and what was in the Friends of the Library. Both numbers, I suspect, are high. And I guess they need a balance to run their business. But to Josh's point earlier, I don't really think they have a plan, and they've really never had a plan in terms of how to do that. So that's why I drilled down probably more than I should have. But to your point, it's the same questions and the same answers year in and year out.
And we can go ahead and play the dance every year, but I just didn't know if we should have a conversation with them and say, listen, we expect that 2/3 of the state aid is going to be spent on operating expenses, and the other third you can use for pilot and capital, or something along those lines. I don't know if there's sense or if there's something written in the state rule.
Dick?
Yeah, I think one logically could, just picking up on Tom's point, one could logically say standard operations ought to be paid out of the budget, and this ought to be treated as extraordinary revenue for extraordinary projects. That is an approach. Or it may be, as Tom suggested, X% goes for operations, Y% for extraordinary, build it up for things like the $8,000 chairs they were looking for a year or two ago. But
yeah.
Louise?
So since I spend so much time with Anne over how many ever years talking about these things, I think one of the issues is that certain things will be budgeted annually for the state aid account. And then what will happen is there are savings in the budget that show up. A lot of it is with staffing. So what they'll do is they'll, instead of turning back the funds, they expend the library budget. And then we have this other account growing. So I think that that's one issue. The other thing is it's really hard to move both the library trustees and the library director in new directions. So I actually had two really, really good conversations this year. One with a new library trustee who was here today about all the opportunity that their strategic plan presents them with right now. Because they're actually looking potentially at what the libraries may look like in the next 10 years. Once people get used to attending programs virtually, yes, for the smaller kids, they might attend programs not virtually, but the reason they have so many more people attending right now is one, people have the time, but also it's much more convenient. You don't have to be there at 3 p.m. on Monday afternoon. You can be there at any time. And so, we talked a lot about that. And, maybe it's time for them to hire a consultant to see, what is it that the library should look like, rather than continue to operate the way they are. We talked about their book budget a bit in our meeting, because one of my questions was, do you really need $250,000 of books when every year it seems like you're going to need $50,000 for electronic books, or whatever term they use when they talk about them. So maybe you don't need $250,000 a book because we belong to the Minuteman Library Consortium. But there's not a lot of that kind of thinking that is occurring within the library trustees. And the trustees have a lot of power under state law. I mean, they write that 5-year strategic plan. Like, they have a real hand in it. They're much more like the school committee in terms of their involvement than other boards. So, just kind of to give you a sense of how open they are, or to various discussions. But I think, libraries are just that. They adjust after the times. And that account has been exactly the same, $130,000 for I don't know how many years.
Right.
It just doesn't change. It's up. It's 132, it's 141, it's 123. It just fluctuates in that range. And I think they just view it as a little savings account.
And how much state aid do they get every year?
About $40,000. It varies. Also, it fluctuates.
So that's essentially what, because looking at the list, that's about what they spend each year, between 25
Yeah.
and 40,000. Yeah.
Yep. So they're keeping that little nest egg intact. And then they're spending about what they're getting on an annual basis.
Because they really want that $500,000 book sorter or whatever it is.
Yeah, that just, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, but they say they're getting a new website, which was paid for through donations. You know, so they're thinking a little bit more modern.
And does the state give direction or some sort of
Oh yeah.
parameters on how the monies should or shouldn't be spent?
Yeah, and they provide an outline of what the strategic plan should look like, and it's very library-ish. The whole thing. They all look the same, all the strategic plans.
Didn't they want to undertake, or where are they on undertaking it, like bringing in a consultant for a space planning study?
They still want to do that, but because of COVID, that they really can't do that. And you know, I agreed that they probably want to wait a year after we're out of the pandemic to see what happens to the library.
Yeah. I would argue that all that late afternoon and weekend utilization of the tables and the rooms for tutors will just be done on Zoom. So I you know, maybe they will have all the space that they didn't know they had available to them. So
They're going to have to wait. I did also ask whether there were opportunities for them to rent out the space, but they said no.
Of course.
Of course they did.
Louise,
Yeah.
when Ms. Thomas was talking about how much money is spent per community,
Yeah.
do you have a sense of utilization per community and how it relates to what they spend?
I do not. And actually the two other metrics that we would really need. So every day libraries record how many transactions take place. That's the other metric that we would need. And then, so it's like a circulation metric, and then a person usage metric.
I'd be curious, since I guess to quote her, we're at the bottom of the pile there. I'd be curious what our population numbers are like that.
Yeah, those are the communities she chose to quote.
You know, one of the questions I had is, what would it cost if to go from 54 where we were to 80? And that's going to be $100,000. I mean, that's going to be a huge number.
Oh yeah, no, it's in the hundreds.
No, it's $30. It would be $30 times 30,000 people. That's a
Yeah.
million.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
All
open
the
up
way
can
up
of worms
there.
on the library, but I just, I didn't
No,
know if there was some sort of committee or something. Maybe we just have to live with the annual conversation, and maybe that's the best use of the time anyway.
So they do have they do have new trustees this year who are open to new ideas. And I think you saw two of them tonight. And they're definitely interested in new ideas. Carol is still the chair, Thomas, but the other two on my screen, they were on either end. And, you know, Jay is really interested in, you know, what can they do strategically with the library?
Good.
Yeah. I love having those conversations every year. The same conversation over and over again.
Like rereading a good book, right?
Anything else on the library? So, I mean, the other thing is I just wanted to make sure everybody read their email, and we will have a 9th Finance Committee member in January. Jim Healy will be joining us. I'm sure that you all know him pretty well, and he's served on the Finance Committee, and he served as Finance Committee chair, and I think his addition to the team will be great, and will be able to use his expertise, and certainly he has a great knowledge of the town, great knowledge of the select board, obviously, and he'll hit the ground running. So
We can always use another attorney.
I'm sorry?
So we can always use another attorney.
Not a majority yet, but we're getting there.
So if there's nothing else,
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
great. Roll call vote to end the meeting. Dick,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Josh,
Aye.
okay. John,
Before I say aye, I want to wish happy holidays to all and be safe.
Thank you indeed.
Thank you.
And then I say aye.
Louise,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes, and happy shoveling.
yes. Careful tomorrow. Careful out there. All right. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Carol.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.